I was 9 years old that summer, and my little brother Dennis was almost 7. Every single Father's Day weekend, our family had this sacred tradition. We'd head up to the Great Smoky Mountains for a camping trip. It was always the same crew: Dad, Grandpa, Dennis, and me. We'd pack up the old station wagon in Knoxville before the sun even rose, driving straight into those hazy, blue ridges that felt like stepping into another world entirely. That particular year, another family joined us, friends of my parents with 2 boys around our age. We hiked a long way up to a place called Spencefield, a wide, breathtaking meadow hemmed in by impossibly thick woods. The grass shimmered under the blazing sun, and a light wind carried the pure, clean scent of pine and earth. We set up our tents, cooked lunch over the camp stove, and spent the entire day exploring the trails that spidered off into the shadowy trees. By mid-afternoon, the grown-ups were sitting near the trailhead, deep in conversation, while Dennis and I started whispering with the other boys about playing the ultimate game: hide and seek. "Come on, let's do it," Dennis said, his eyes shining with that familiar, mischievous light. He had on his red shirt and green pants, the outfit Mom insisted on for the entire trip so he'd be easy to spot. "Yeah, let's hide and jump out at the dads," one of the other boys, Tim, whispered. His brother, Alex, grinned. "But don't go too far or we'll get in trouble." We waited, hearts pounding with excitement, until the adults were completely distracted, and then we slipped like shadows toward the edge of the clearing. Dad noticed us at the last second and called out, half smiling, "You boys stay close." We just giggled and ducked behind the first line of trees. Dennis immediately tugged at my sleeve. "Doug, where should I hide?" I quickly pointed to a thick patch of brush a little downhill. "Over there. We'll all hide and meet back here after." He nodded, a quick, confident bob of his head, and then he ran off, his shoes crunching loudly in the dry leaves. The others scattered, too, while I crouched behind a massive tree trunk, trying to stifle my own laughter. After a tense minute, Tim whispered the signal, "Now!" and we all leapt up, sprinting toward the grown-ups, shouting at the top of our lungs. They jumped, laughed, and Dad ruffled my hair. "Good one, boys," he said, smiling. Then I looked around, a sudden prickle of confusion running down my spine. "Hey, where's Dennis?" Tim just shrugged. "He was right over there." Alex pointed vaguely toward the bush. "Maybe he's still hiding." Dad's smile faded into a slight frown. He called out, "Dennis, come on, buddy. Game's over." No answer. We started laughing nervously, calling his name again. I pushed aside the branches of the bush where he'd hidden. It was completely empty. "He must have gone deeper in," I said, my stomach inexplicably tightening into a hard knot. "Dennis!" Grandpa's voice, deeper and more serious, echoed through the trees. "This isn't funny anymore." We spread out, checking behind every log, every rock. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Dad's tone changed. It became sharper, strained. "Dennis!" I ran ahead of the group, shouting, my voice bouncing uselessly off the dense tree trunks. The woods just swallowed the sound whole. Everything felt suddenly, eerily still, as if even the birds had stopped to listen. We hurried back to the tents, thinking maybe he'd looped around, that he'd be there waiting with a triumphant smile, but there was no sign of him. Mom wasn't with us on that trip, it was just the guys. And in that moment, I remember wishing harder than I ever had in my life that she was. Dad ran down the nearest trail, frantically checking the switchbacks, while the rest of us waited in a tense, silent circle. When he came back, he was out of breath, his eyes wide with something I'd never seen before. "Nothing," he said quietly, the word hanging heavy in the air. Grandpa put a firm hand on his shoulder. "We'd better call the Rangers." By then, it had been about half an hour. When the Rangers arrived, they were all calm efficiency, asking rapid-fire questions and taking notes. One of them, a man with a kind face, crouched down to my level. "Tell me exactly what happened, son. Every detail." I told him everything: the game, the hiding spots, the last place I saw Dennis run. "He was wearing a red shirt," I added, desperately, as if that bright color could somehow make all the difference. They nodded, their expressions unreadable, and started organizing search teams. "We'll find him," one said with practiced reassurance. But I could tell from the way Dad looked at the ground, his shoulders slumped, that he wasn't so sure. That night, the woods came alive with moving lights, flashlights weaving through the trees like frantic fireflies. I remember the relentless sound of boots on the dirt, the harsh static of radios, and the low, desperate murmur of men calling my brother's name over and over and over into the void. At one point, a ranger froze mid-stride. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. We all stopped dead. It was faint, far off, something like a cry. "Could be an animal?" someone else muttered. But the sound made my heart pound against my ribs. "Dennis!" I screamed into the suffocating dark, my voice cracking with fear. No reply, only silence. By morning, the scene had transformed. More searchers arrived, volunteers, soldiers, even helicopters sweeping the misty ridgelines with mechanical precision. The forest that had felt so fun and open just yesterday now seemed endless, heavy with a cold mist and a deafening silence. Thing before he hid? Anything at all? "No," I said again, feeling helpless, just where to hide. At one point, a ranger found a set of small footprints leading toward a creek. One shoe print, one bare foot. My heart leapt into my throat. "That's him," I said, but the prints vanished at the water's jagged edge. That was the first time I saw true, unvarnished fear in my father's eyes, a raw, haunting terror. Later, a chilling report came in. A family hiking nearby reported hearing a scream around the same time Dennis disappeared. They told a ranger they'd also seen a man moving quickly through the woods, carrying something wrapped in what they described as red cloth. The man was unshaven, dirty, his clothes torn. "Red cloth," Dad repeated, his voice trembling. Dennis's shirt had been red. That detail burned itself into my mind forever. Suddenly, the forest didn't just feel empty, it felt alive, malevolent, watching us. Dad began to believe, with a grim certainty, that someone had taken him. "Those footprints stopped at the creek," he said that night, staring blankly into the campfire. Whoever it was knew what he was doing. I lay awake in the tent, listening to the crackle of the dying fire and the wind brushing against the thin tent walls. Every rustle, every snap outside now felt like approaching footsteps. I couldn't stop thinking about Dennis's laugh, the way he'd looked back over his shoulder with a grin before running to hide. The guilt was a physical weight. I should have gone with him. I should have kept him close. The days stretched into weeks. The rangers left, then the volunteers. Eventually, we had to go home without him. For months, I'd jerk my head toward the window every time a car slowed near our house, half expecting to see him walking up the driveway, smiling, dirt on his shoes, proud of how well he'd hidden. But he never came back. Years later, they found bones somewhere deep in the Smokies. People said they might be his, but nothing was ever proven. Dad never stopped searching in his own way, calling park offices, writing letters, driving up there once or twice a year. He'd stand at the edge of that same meadow, just staring at the tree line, forever waiting. I still dream about that day sometimes. The red shirt vanishing into the green, the laughter fading, the woods holding their breath. The Smokies took my brother, or someone in them did. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, isn't just that we lost him. It's that we never knew how. That Mother's Day morning began like so many others in our family, wrapped in a blanket of normalcy and gentle love. Warm smiles after church, the faint, familiar smell of Mom's perfume mixing with the scent of polished pews, and the golden promise of a picnic in the country. I was 11 then, old enough to button my own dress and help with my little sister, Marjorie. She was 4, a perfect bundle of freckles and red curls that never seemed to stay brushed for long. Dad used to call her his little spark. My brother, Alan, who was 7, sat between us in the back seat, kicking his shoes rhythmically against the seat, humming some tune from Sunday school. "Settle down, Alan," Mom said gently, turning to smile at us. She wore her cream hat with the little blue ribbon, the one she only took out for special occasions. Dad was at the wheel, tapping the steering wheel to the rhythm of a hymn as the road wound through the sun-dappled forest near Bradford. Sunlight flickered through the trees, bright and alive, and the windows were cracked open just enough to let in the pine-scented air. We met the Ackerlins at a clearing near the road, a quiet, pretty place Dad favored for picnics. A gentle stream ran nearby, and a patch of open grass was dotted with wildflowers. Mr. Ackerlin was already unpacking his fishing gear, while his wife helped Mom spread the big checkered blanket. I remember the sound of easy laughter, the rustle of paper wrapping, and the wonderful smell of ham sandwiches mixing with the cool, clean breath of the earth. Marjorie tugged at my sleeve, her eyes bright. "Daddy, let's pick flowers for Mama." Her little hand felt small and impossibly warm in mine. I looked at Dad, who was deep in conversation with Mr. Ackerlin about the trout in the stream, and then back at her eager, upturned face. "Okay," I said, "but not too far." Hand in hand, we skipped toward the tree line, our patent leather shoes slipping a little on the damp grass. The woods were gentle there, open enough that sunlight poured through the canopy in long golden ribbons. Violets carpeted the ground in spots, bright purple against the lush green. Marjorie laughed with pure joy as she plucked them, her curls bouncing with every movement. "I'm going to make the biggest bunch ever," she declared. Then the game started, half pretend, half serious play. "Let's play hide and seek with the trees," she chirped. I closed my eyes, pressing my hands over them dramatically. 1, 2, 3. She giggled, the sound like tiny wind chimes. When I found her behind a rock, she squealed and ran to hug me. Mom's voice floated softly from the picnic blanket. "Don't go too far, girls." Dad and Mr. Ackerlin headed off toward the stream with their fishing poles. "Watch for snakes," Dad called over his shoulder, a standard warning. Mom leaned back against the car, shading her eyes. "I'll rest a bit. The sun's making me drowsy." Alan stayed near the food, happily busy with a cookie. The day felt still, slow, perfect, one of those afternoons you are convinced will last forever. Marjorie darted behind a thick clump of bushes. "You can't find me this time," she said, her voice teasing from the foliage. I counted to 10 and looked up. "Ready or not?" I found her easily, crouched and grinning. "You're too easy," I laughed. "Now it's your turn to count." She covered her eyes with her tiny hands, fingers splayed. I slipped behind a rock just a few steps away, stifling a laugh. When she found me, we both collapsed into laughter until our sides hurt. We'd gathered a pretty pile of violets by then. "Let's take them to Mama," I said. But Marjorie shook her head, a sly little smile on her face. "You go. I'll hide really good this time." I hesitated, the rule about staying together whispering in my mind. "Okay," I finally said, "but don't move until I get back." She nodded solemnly, her curls bouncing. I jogged up to the car. "Where's your sister?" "She's hiding," I replied casually. "I'll go get her." When I returned to our spot, I called softly, "Marjorie?" "Game's over." No reply. I checked behind the rock. Empty. Behind the bushes, nothing. The woods, once filled with the cheerful chirping of birds, had suddenly gone too quiet. "Marjorie!" I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. Alan came running when he heard the tension in my voice. "What's wrong?" "I can't find her," I said, trying desperately to sound calm. We searched together, parting bushes, peering behind every tree. The unnatural stillness made my skin prickle with a cold dread. When Dad and Mr. Ackerlin returned from the stream, their easy laughter died the moment they saw my face. "She was just here," I told them, my breath coming quick. Dad's expression hardened into something stern and fearful. "Spread out," he ordered, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Call her name." Mom's voice cracked as she shouted, "Marjorie! Come to Mama." Mrs. Ackerlin hurried toward the road, calling too. The forest now echoed with her name, "Marjorie! Marjorie!" A haunting chorus bouncing off the silent trees. Then, someone found her little bouquet of violets. They were crushed near the rock where she'd last hidden. The stems were broken. A cold, Heavy stones settled in the pit of my stomach. Dad drove into town to alert the police. I remember the station's smell stale coffee, printer ink, and cigarette smoke. Little girl, red hair, freckles, red hat, Dad told the officer, his voice tight. She couldn't have gone far. The officer nodded, professional and reassuring. We'll find her. Don't you worry. By evening, the peaceful forest was blazing with lantern light. Men from nearby towns arrived in a wave of solidarity. The symphony of boots crunching on undergrowth and voices calling into the growing dark replaced the day's silence. Marjorie West. Women brought food, and I sat beside Mom, watching her twist her hands over and over in her lap. A soft, cold rain began to fall. The searchers pressed on until midnight. At dawn, they came back with bloodhounds. A handler let a dog sniff the dress Marjorie had worn, and the animal bounded uphill, pulling toward an old, abandoned cabin. Inside, nothing, just dust and a deafening silence. The trail ended abruptly at the road. A man mentioned a dark-colored Plymouth sedan seen speeding away that afternoon. The mere thought of it made my heart thud painfully against my ribs. Days passed, then weeks. The woods were combed over and over. Wells were checked. Streams were dragged. Fields were turned upside down. Flyers went up on every pole and in every store window. Missing, Marjorie West, age 4. The picture showed her smiling, those curls bright as a new copper penny. But she never came back. The FBI came, asked endless questions, took meticulous notes. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said she'd fallen into an old, forgotten well. Others whispered about bears or strange men seen on the road. Dad barely slept, roaming the woods night after night with a lone lantern. Mom sat by the phone, a silent statue waiting for a ring that never came. The years blurred together. The posters yellowed and faded. The volunteers stopped coming. We moved houses, but not far. Just in case she finds her way home, Mom said once, her voice trembling so slightly you might miss it. Alan stopped talking about her altogether. I tried to grow up, to move forward, but a part of me, a frozen 11-year-old part, stayed forever in those woods, counting to 10. I married. I had children of my own, but I never, ever stopped wondering. Did someone take her? Or did she simply wander a few steps too far, chasing a butterfly into the deep, inviting trees? Sometimes, when I visit that forest, I swear on my life I can still hear her laugh. Soft, quick, fading away between the tall pines. The scariest part, the part that never leaves you, isn't just what might have happened. It's what we will never know. Because somewhere out there, the woods still keep their secret. And I still listen for her voice in the wind. It was October of 2006, one of those crisp, flawless Oregon days where the air itself smells of pine, cold stone, and infinite possibility. My son, Alex, and I had driven out to Crater Lake National Park for a weekend together, just the two of us. He was 8 years old, small for his age, a contained storm of restless energy and insatiable curiosity. Lately, he'd been obsessed with rocks and minerals, collecting them like priceless treasures and carefully labeling them in old mason jars at home. I thought the trip would do him good, let him run free, explore, maybe calm that beautiful, intense focus that sometimes came with his autism. We stopped at a pullout near Cleetwood Cove, a quiet overlook where the stark volcanic soil rose sharply into a tangled fortress of pines. Far below us, the lake shimmered, a deep, impossible, almost painful blue. The wind carried a sharp, clean scent of wet bark and distant snow. "Dad, look! Yellow rocks!" Alex shouted, pointing excitedly up the steep slope. He started climbing before I could even form a word of caution, his red sneakers flashing like beacons against the dark earth. I laughed under my breath, a sound of pure paternal affection. "Hey, slow down, buddy. We've got all day." He turned, grinning, his freckles standing out bright against his pale skin. "Can we play hide and seek? Just one game?" I hesitated. It was late afternoon, and the sun was already beginning its slow dip toward the tree line, painting long, stealing shadows. But he was so eager, his eyes wide, his whole body vibrating with excitement. "All right," I said finally, surrendering to the moment. "You hide. I'll count." He gave a little cheer of victory and darted uphill, small stones scattering behind him like fleeing insects. I leaned against the car, raised my voice, and started the count, the numbers echoing into the vastness of the trees. 1, 2, 3. I could hear him laughing, branches snapping as he climbed higher, deeper. By the time I reached 20, the sound of him had faded into the forest's embrace. Ready or not, here I come. The woods were preternaturally still, silent except for the constant sigh of the wind. I started slow, playing along, checking behind the boulders and fallen logs at the base of the slope. "Alex!" I called out, a smile in my voice. No answer. I grinned a little, thinking he was trying to outsmart me. He was good at that. "You picked a good spot, huh? Well, I'll find you." I climbed higher, my boots slipping in the loose, gritty cinder. The trees thickened, their roots twisting like ancient ropes across the ground. "This is fun, but we've got to go soon," I shouted a little louder. Still nothing. By the time I reached the crest of the slope, my grin had completely faded. I scanned the clearing ahead, a few scattered pines, some jagged rocky outcrops. The air wasn't just quiet, it was hollow. I called again, my voice now stripped of all playfulness. "Alex, game's done." Only my own echo answered back, mocking me. I began searching in earnest, panic beginning to whisper at the edges of my mind. I wove through brush, peered under logs, behind every stump. "Buddy, come on. You win. Let's go." 5 minutes passed, then 10. My heart began to hammer a frantic rhythm against my ribs. He'd hidden stubbornly before, refusing to come out until he decided the game was truly over. But this felt profoundly different. The woods stretched endlessly in every direction, a chaotic maze of green and gray, and the slope dropped away steeply toward the lake's unforgiving edge. I called again, my voice cracking with the first real fear. "Alex, answer me right now." Nothing. I jogged back down toward the car, my lungs burning, my eyes wildly scanning the tree line. The car door was still locked. No sign he'd returned. I fumbled for my phone. Barely a bar of signal. I tried calling his name into the phone anyway, pacing like a caged animal. "Come on. Come on." Finally, a call connected long enough for me to reach Park Dispatch. "My son's missing," I said, the words foreign and terrible in my mouth. "We were playing hide and seek. He ran up the hill, and he didn't come back down." Within an hour, 2 rangers arrived, calm and professional, their demeanor trying to mask an urgency I could already feel rising in my chest like a cold tide. "How long has he been missing?" one asked, his voice level. 40 minutes, I said, the time frame sounding both insignificant and eternal. "He's wearing a blue coat, cargo pants, red shoes." They nodded and started scanning the slope, their radios crackling to life. Soon, more arrived, a stream of volunteers, search dogs, their flashlights cutting through the gathering dusk as the sun bled out behind the mountains. We followed his tracks, small, clear prints pressed into the soft volcanic soil, leading unmistakably upward. Then, abruptly, they stopped where the ground turned to solid rock. "He went this way," a ranger said, shining his light ahead into a wall of blackness. The beam just disappeared. I called his name again and again, until my throat was raw and my voice was just a hoarse whisper. Night fell hard and fast. The temperature plummeted, the forest transforming into something cold, alien, and hostile. Helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights sweeping the ridges like accusing fingers. I remember sitting on a rock for just a moment, my breath fogging in the beam of a flashlight, whispering to no one, "He wouldn't go far. He knows better." But deep down, in a place I dared not visit, I wasn't sure anymore. The next morning brought hundreds of searchers, a small army of rangers, deputies, volunteers with dogs and heat-sensing equipment. "We'll grid the area," the lead ranger said, spreading a vast map over the hood of a truck. I stood beside him, nodding numbly. I had barely slept. I just needed to move, to do something. We scoured miles of brutal terrain up sheer slopes, down treacherous gullies, through dense pine thickets and over fields of jagged volcanic rock. A chorus of voices called his name from every direction, a desperate echo across the silent park. Alex, it's Dad. Come on out. Nothing. A search dog picked up a faint scent trail that curved toward the west, near a drainage leading toward the lake, but it vanished where the rocks began again. Could mean he changed direction, the handler said quietly, not meeting my eyes. Then, the rain started, a cold, relentless drizzle that washed away what few traces we had left. My ex-wife arrived later that day. She looked at me like I was a stranger, her eyes hollow. How could he just disappear? She whispered, the question hanging between us like a blade. I don't know, I said, the words utterly inadequate. We were playing. Rumors began to swirl among the searchers, each one a fresh torment. A hiker who'd seen a lone man wandering the road earlier. A parked vehicle nobody recognized. Someone mentioning fresh cougar tracks nearby. Each theory hit like a physical blow to the chest. My mind conjured unbearable images, him hurt, cold, scared, or something far, far worse. Days passed. Reporters showed up, shoving microphones forward, asking questions I had no answers for. Tell us about your son, one said, her voice prodding. I stared past her, toward the mist-shrouded ridge line. He's smart, I said softly, to no one in particular. He loves hiding. Please, if anyone knows anything. By the 5th day, a thin, cruel snow began to fall, flakes drifting down silently through the somber trees. We'll have to suspend the ground search at night, a ranger told me gently. It's getting too dangerous. I begged them, my voice breaking. He's out there. I can feel it. But by the end of the week, the official search wound down. The volunteers, exhausted and heartsick, went home. The rangers packed up their gear. I stayed. For weeks, I walked those same trails alone, calling his name into the unfeeling wind. I have returned year after year, checking the same ridges, the same gullies. Nothing has ever turned up. Not his blue jacket. Not a single red sneaker. Not a single scrap of clothing. Some nights, even now, years later, I dream I hear his voice faint, far away, just out of reach. I wake up in the dark and listen to the crushing quiet of my own home, half expecting to hear his laugh, to see him step out from behind a door, saying he'd won the game after all. But the forest keeps its secrets. It holds them tight, and somewhere in those vast, silent, beautiful woods above Crater Lake, my son is still hiding, forever waiting for me to find him. Every single afternoon after school, we'd be out there until dark, a fearless pack of kids claiming the wilderness as our own. We'd climb the old oak until our hands were raw, build forts from fallen logs, dare each other to explore the far edge of the woods where the light dimmed early and the air always held a deeper, more permanent cold. One perfect Saturday, my friend Jack got that familiar, mischievous glint in his eye, the one that promised adventure, and said, "Let's play hide and seek out here. The woods are huge. No one will get found for hours." We all laughed, the idea sounding like the ultimate challenge, the pinnacle of our childhood freedom. I volunteered to be it first. My friend Lisa grinned. "Close your eyes and count to 50. And no peeking." I leaned against the rough, familiar bark of the big oak, covering my eyes securely with both hands. 1, 2, 3. Their laughter and the crunch of their footsteps on dry leaves faded rapidly into the distance, swallowed by the immensity of the forest. By the time I reached 50, the world had gone utterly still, silent except for the lonely rustle of wind through the high branches. Ready or not, I called out, "Here I come!" I started slowly, my eyes scanning the dappled patches of sunlight breaking through the dense canopy. The forest smelled richly of damp earth and pungent pine sap, and the quiet felt thick, like a blanket. I checked behind every promising fallen log and low bush until I spotted Tom behind a pile of mossy rocks. his shoulders shaking as he tried desperately not to laugh. "Got you," I yelled. He groaned in mock frustration and joined me, brushing dirt off his jeans. "Come on," he said. "Let's find the others." We moved together, a team now. "Emily always hides up high," I whispered. "Probably in a tree somewhere." We searched, calling out playful taunts now and then. I soon caught a flash of Lisa's pink sweater behind a wide trunk, and she squealed as we tagged her. "You two are too good," she said, half annoyed but smiling. Jack, though, was nowhere to be found. We wandered farther than we usually dared, down to where the ground sloped toward a shallow creek. The air grew damp and noticeably cooler. The playful mood was gone now, replaced only by the distant trickle of water and the lone, harsh caw of a crow somewhere high above us. "Jack!" I shouted, my voice echoing faintly and unervingly through the trees. That's when I saw it. A patch of soil, darker than the rest, mounded up unevenly near the base of a cedar tree as if someone had been digging there recently, and in a hurry. "What's that?" I asked, pointing, a knot of unease forming in my gut. Lisa frowned, squinting. Probably just an animal burrow. But when we got closer, a smell hit us, a sour, heavy, unmistakable odor. Rot, thick and cloying in the cool air. Tom, braver or more curious than the rest of us, bent down and nudged the dirt with a long stick. "This looks weird," he muttered. As he stirred the soil, something pale broke through the surface, smooth and too rigid. At first, my brain refused to process it. A root, a strange white root, but then the shape resolved. Fingers. Lisa's gasp cut through the silence like glass. "Is that a hand?" Tom stumbled backward, his face bleaching of all color. "We need to go. Now." His skin. The air around us felt heavy, suffocating, charged with a terrible wrongness. "Who?" I whispered, the question dying in my throat. We'd all heard the stories, of course, people gone missing from nearby towns, but they were just that. Stories. Ghost tales told to scare kids around campfires. They weren't real. They didn't leave a smell in the air. Lisa grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "Alex, come on." Then crack. A branch snapped somewhere behind us. Loud. Deliberate. Tom froze. "Did you hear that?" Another snap, closer this time. Heavy, unmistakable footsteps on dry leaves. Not the light, quick scurry of a deer or a raccoon. These were boots. Slow, deliberate, moving. "Someone's coming," Lisa whispered, her voice tight with terror. We started backing away from the grisly mound, our hearts pounding in a sick, synchronized rhythm. Through a gap in the trees, a figure emerged. A man tall, broad-shouldered, his face hidden in the deep shadow of the canopy. And he was walking straight toward us. "Run!" I hissed. We bolted. The peaceful forest exploded into a nightmare of noise, our panicked, ragged breaths, the pounding of our frantic feet, the crack of branches whipping against our arms and faces, and behind it all, the man's heavy, determined footsteps crashing after us. "Hey, stop!" he shouted, his voice rough, angry, and close. We didn't dare look back. Tom tripped over an exposed root, yelping as his knee slammed into a rock. But Lisa and I hooked our hands under his arms, dragging him back up. "Keep going. Stop. Kids!" the man yelled again. Even closer now. My lungs were on fire, but the sight of blessed sunlight ahead, the edge of the woods, the familiar shape of Emily's backyard gave me a final, desperate burst of strength. We burst out of the tree line, stumbling into the open grass, gasping for air. Emily stood up from where she'd been hiding behind a garden shed, her eyes wide with confusion. "What happened? Where's Jack?" "There's a body," Tom gasped, doubling over. "And someone's chasing us." We didn't stop. We sprinted the last stretch to my house, slamming the door shut behind us and fumbling with the lock. My mom turned from the kitchen sink, and a plate slipped from her hands, shattering on the floor when she saw our faces. What on earth? We all talked over each other. A chaotic jumble of words, the smell, the hand, the man in the woods. Her own hands began to tremble as she grabbed the phone. Yes, officer. My son and his friends, they found something. Something terrible. The sirens came fast, their wails tearing the afternoon apart. Blue lights flashed against the serene trees. The woods were soon filled with the static of radios and the low, serious voices of officers as I led them back, retracing our terrifying steps. I pointed a shaking finger at the mound of disturbed earth. They dug slowly, carefully, and uncovered exactly what we already knew in our souls was there. A human body, wrapped in stained sheets, buried in a shallow, hurried grave. It was someone, they told us later, who had been missing from a nearby town. And the man who chased us? He was caught later that same afternoon, hiding not half a mile from where we'd found the grave. He confessed, the police told us. We had done the right thing, but that night sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house made me sit bolt upright, my eyes darting to the window, half expecting to see a shadow watching silently from the tree line. Sometimes, even now, years later, the thought creeps in, that while we were out there playing our innocent games in the woods laughing, hiding, counting to 50, he might have been out there too. Not playing, just watching and waiting.